Just as COVID-19 caught the world by surprise, distance learning came suddenly to many California school districts. It caught them unprepared and ill-equipped, and let's be honest, most have struggled mightily to put an effective program together over the past 3 months for many reasons. Most districts don't know what school will look like when it restarts less than 2 months from now, but distance learning will be part of what districts will offer at some point and in some form, whether at the start of school, whether during the next wave of the COVID-19, or as part of a split week or blended program. So it's important that schools make the next phase of remote learning engaging and challenging for all students, not an afterthought or a last resort, but as a fundamental piece in rethinking what teaching and learning should look like in the future. Today and tomorrow, we will take a deep look at two very different districts whose experiences with distance learning can serve as a model and whose planning for the future can serve as a guide. Tomorrow, join us as we speak with Superintendent Michael Matsuda and Assistant Superintendent Jaron Freed of the Anaheim Union High School District for what they're calling transforming education in a post-pandemic world. They'll talk about collaborating with teachers on developing online skills, remote student internships, and their new online academy. But now, let's focus on another success story. Pajaro Valley Unified. It's not in Silicon Valley, it's in Watsonville, which until now had been known for juicy strawberries. Joining me are Superintendent Michelle Rodriguez, who is a teacher, literacy coach, principal, technology expert, and assistant superintendent at Santa Ana Unified before being named Pajaro Valley Superintendent 6 years ago. With her is Ivan Alcaraz. He's a native of Watsonville, who is principal of the Rolling Hills Middle School. Before that, he was an intervention counselor and assistant principal at Watsonville High. Michelle and Ivan, thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having us.
You know, with foresight and planning that would make Dr. Anthony Fauci proud, you responded quickly and effectively to the coronavirus. You got a full-fledged distance learning program up in a week after you closed. How did you do that?
So first, I want to just tell you who we serve, and that will help to answer that question of how we got it up and running so quickly. So we serve approximately over 20,000 students. Many of them are vulnerable student populations, so 66% English learners, 81% are students of poverty. And we have 2,469 employees. And all of those employees are really the reason why we were able to get up and running within a week. So within 1 day of closure, on the first day of closure, we were already feeding thousands of students lunch. By Thursday of that week, we were already providing over 15,000 Chromebooks and hotspots to our families through our technology department. And then by the following Monday, we were serving 20,000 students with our teachers and staff. And the way that we were able to do that is really having staff that was focusing from the very beginning and has been over time focusing on nurturing the whole child. So we know that our students and our parents, if you work in PVUSD, you are here to support students that really need an advocate by their side. And we really always consistently are underscoring the alignment of the things that we do, which you can see in our target for student success here. But we're trying to align and marry our programs, our services, and the relationships within our community to really look at the social, cognitive, emotional, and physical well-being of the whole child. And so many say, several school districts, many school districts were almost paralyzed with the fear of getting started. Something that we've been doing here for many years now is really looking at our innovation framework, which you see off to the left, where we're designing programs and then we're iterating and implementing and reorienting along the way. So our staff was not scared to get started. They knew that our students every day that we did not provide supports to our students, that it was going to be a detriment to them. So they were dedicated. They knew they could get it done. So within a week, they had mobilized themselves and were ready on Monday in order to do it. Now, was the first week perfect? No. But that is the whole essence of being innovative, right? Where you're working on allowing people to get started, and then you inspire them and encourage them to take risk, and then reorient and reiterate along the way. And so here you can see some pictures of students throughout PVUSD and what we were doing prior to the closure. And this is all important because you can see that we were taking risk and that we were really working on technology from the very beginning. So kind of moving on to what we did, we really believed in facilitating what we called 360-degree communication. We wanted to make sure it was multilingual. So we not only do it in English and Spanish, but we also have a significant group of students and parents who speak Mixteco Bajo. And so you'll see off to the right, you'll see the website, which has not only the COVID-19 information up here for the parents, but I also do a weekly FAQ. So you can see all 8 editions of those. We have done over 70 communications since March. And so we have really tried to highly communicate with our parents and moving that forward. One thing when we talk about it, it's not only communication, but it's also support. So there's not only a parent hotline, which you see here, but there's also a teacher tech hotline, and I'm going to be giving you the numbers in a minute. We also have an in-person, so this is a drive-through process, which we have a roundabout right here at the district office where people can safely stay in their cars and they can come with their computers, and you'll see our technicians out there on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 12, and you'll see a student providing one of the technicians their Chromebook. They right then and there fix it for them and make sure that students can continue to have those services. And so this is what it looks like. So we have just between March 27th and May 29th, so just in 2 weeks, we not only gave out 15,000 Chromebooks within the first several days of closure, we have now given out 1,000 hotspots. We have 2,481 teacher coaching sessions have occurred between that time. The drive-through I was just mentioning were above 784. We do have parents calling in to the tech support, and that is now at 3,360. Again, that occurs in all 3 languages. And then we have staff calls as well at 2,702. So just a really incredible job that our tech department has been doing in order to support people. So we kind of think about, well, what do people say? So we did a survey out with our parents and our teachers and students. And so you'll see a little bit about that in here. From the teacher survey, I want to draw your attention to these, to 2 of them. One, the 86%, the question was, are they receiving consistent messaging about the district response to COVID? And 89% of the teachers said that they strongly agree that they're receiving consistent messaging. That's important because the consistent messaging leads to people being able to activate and do good work for students. And then this one, I know who to go to when I need help. 83% of the teachers said yes, that they know exactly who they need to go to. And I thought it was interesting because the number exactly mirrored it. And then we asked the parents many of the same things. And parents said on consistent messaging, 86%. And then we asked them, do you have it in a language you easily understand? 94%. These right here, just so you know, these are negatives. So it's good to have small numbers. So for example, the information I received is too complex for me to understand. So only 11% still said, despite our efforts to make it comprehensible, that it was too complex, but 89% are saying that what we're providing them is understandable. And then, of course, super important, our students, right? Our students, do they know how to communicate, who to communicate with, and who to have support? And so 96% of our students said they know how to get a hold of their teachers. And 93% said if they needed support that they knew who to contact. And then just thinking about communication, making sure that they're self-initiated learners, and 91% said that they knew the assignments, and 94% said that they knew how to use the technology, right? They're digital natives and definitely know how to do that work. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ivan, who is going to talk about some of our SEL work.
Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. So through the interactions between students and teacher as we were embarking in distance learning, we quickly learned and discovered that a lot of our students were reporting some sense of feeling stressed or anxious about the future and really what distance learning was going to look like for them. So our staff really recognize and understand that we are an important point of access to students in need of services. And so using the safe and sound social and emotional model, our staff kind of began having discussions on how do we support our students to ensure that they learn how to recognize and manage their emotions, make responsible decisions, and then handle difficult situations effectively. So our curriculum that we use for our social and emotional learning, and I'll talk a little bit about what that looked like, was around the 5 core social and emotional skills, right? So responsible decision-making, self-awareness, social awareness, relationship skills. So, however, really one of the main focus and topics of conversation was really trying to identify what were the needs of our students during this time, and then bridging those resources and services that they needed. So from those conversations, the idea of a Wellness Wednesday was actually developed. These conversations and this idea was actually teacher initiated. So the staff, because they were closely communicating with students, felt that there was an important need for us to incorporate our SEL as part of our schedule. So this really made it easier for us to kind of negotiate our site, distance learning schedule. So with the support of our site union representation, we actually moved our instructional minutes from Wednesday to Monday, Tuesday, academic instruction on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then designated Wednesday as our Wellness Wednesday. So our social and emotional counselor on our campus was really instrumental in the development of our curriculum. So every week, what she would do is actually go on our Google Classroom and would communicate with students via the announcement board and trying to put some of the activities for our students. So the topics that she was putting forward for our students range from self-care strategies to goal setting, to guided meditation. These are all, ideas and needs that were identified by our site survey of student assessment. So we did put out a survey to our students to kind of figure out what is it that they particularly needed, and that's how our curriculum kind of tailored to those needs. In addition, we did work with our central office or district office, because there is a resource page for our students, and actually our student services department put a virtual relaxation room. So that was also shared with students as part of our SEL curriculum. So simultaneously, what really also allowed our Wellness Wednesday, it really allowed our staff to use Wednesday as a check-in for students who actually had low participation. So while our social emotional counselor from our campus was putting these activities forward for our students, our staff actually also use Wednesdays as an opportunity to connect with students who had low participation.
Want to go over this, Ivan, or do you want me to?
Well, I have a question, if I can. So you have an unusual relationship with a nonprofit, the Pajaro Valley Prevention and Student Assistance. That's
Yes.
actually, and you're on the board. How
I
did
am.
that work, and how did they help you during this period of school closures?
Sure. So it has it's been generations now that it has been a nonprofit that is designated just for the school district. What we have found, so they service normally during the regular school day, they service about 7,000 students a year. We have 20,000 students, so about a third of our students receive their support in some form. What was different about this was that we wound up shifting significant resources of theirs to the parents. So what we found was many more parents needed the support during the closure than our students also needed it, but the increase of the parents went significantly up. So generally how it works, we have social emotional counselors, so they're only credentialed to do a certain level of support. And then PVPSA are trained therapists that can provide a higher level of ongoing therapy to students. And so it's really a tiered support system that starts with individual support from the teachers and from counselors. Then it moves up to our social emotional counselors, and then it moves up to PVPSA. And if you need additional support, then it moves to a county level support.
Well, I can see by your page, it's one of many partners that you have.
Yeah, so I think the reason why we put this here is just leveraging the community partners, right? What we found is many school districts kind of circled in and wound up not utilizing their partners the way that they had during the regular school year. We did the opposite. We really knew that we needed to open up our implementation to where all of our students would relate and actually receive additional resources from all these organizations. So we have many more than 30 partners. These partners that are here are specifically the ones who were giving direct services to students and families. And so so I know I think we'll skip this for a minute and we'll go to lessons learned. Does that sound good, John?
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead, Ivan.
Okay, so first week of us going to distance learning, our staff quickly, recognized the importance of keeping close communication with students. So what we ended up doing, we developed a school-wide communication log that kind of helped track student participation and the level of communication and interventions that were happening between teachers and students. So we did adopt this kind of a tier level system approach. So that was considered our first tier. So after the first week, our staff was communicating constantly with our students, and then figured out that we had about 309 students that had no participation or in one class or more. So that kicked off our intervention quickly after post week 1. So teachers began to reach out more consistently. And then we developed this idea of a caseload approach. So using all of the stakeholders on our campus, right? So our social and emotional counselor, our academic counselor, our Gear Up support staff, we all basically kind of divided the students that were considered not participating and follow them through the week and consistently almost check sometimes daily to ensure that they were participating and that we were providing the support that they needed. So on week 2, we actually dropped down to 131 students who demonstrated that were not participating, and then quickly dropped down to tier 3 to 61 students. So after week 3, what we ended up doing is we followed a coordination of services team. So we developed teams for all of the students that were not participating. That included teachers, some of the resource staff on campus, and we really just try to hone in on how do we support students. So sometimes what that meant was actually connecting them back to our central office because it might have a tech issue that was preventing them from accessing the content, or we actually work closely with our parent education team as well, because one of the things that came up consistently was the monitoring that needed to happen at home from the parents' perspective. So our parent education team did an amazing job at putting, newsletters forward, a parent support group team, and just even tutorial videos on how to even access, the basics of Google Classroom, helping their students, kind of log into Lexia and BrainPop. And all of these, videos were created in multiple languages, including Mixteco as well. So it really was trying to connect all of these services that we were offering as a district to provide support for our students. So it definitely kind of helped out in general to reduce the amount of number of students that were actually not participating to a very, very low number of non-participants.
Yeah. And so there was a question on the database that we use. So our student information system is Synergy. And so we're able to track communication through Synergy, through the intervention tab. Okay.
A couple of folks wanted to know how you funded your Chromebooks and also do you still have enough internet connections, or is you still short some of those, and how do you deal with that?
Sure. So we already had all the Chromebooks here within the district. So we joined the League of Innovative Schools this past year, but it has been years in the making where we have been purchasing technology for our students. So we had enough within the system. We had enough Chromebooks for every student. So and that's one reason why I provided the pictures. So prior to the COVID-19, we already had the internet infrastructure, we already had the computers, and all we had to do was deploy them. In terms of the hotspots, we started out with 250 before COVID-19. We saw COVID-19 happening. We ordered another 500, then we ordered another 250. We were one of the first to request from Google and CDE the collaboration. So we now have 3,000 hotspots from that partnership, and we are receiving another set from Digital Promise because we are part of the League of Innovative Schools. So at this point, we are poised and able to provide any student that needed it a hotspot because we have significant hotspots at this point. So the funding source on all that is LCAP funding. So if you're not from California, it is the additional funding that we receive for our vulnerable student populations. So it's supplemental and concentration funds.
Could you talk a little bit about your instruction? Were there synchronous? Were there all live instruction? And was that partly, how did you deal with academic problems communicating with students that had them?
Sure. So I'll start, and then Ivan, I'm sure can pitch in as well. So we set up some distance learning expectations with our union. So I appreciate PVFT is our union organization for our teachers. They work collaboratively with us, not only for our first MOU, but also for the additional distance learning expectations. Within those expectations, teachers were required to provide support and contact with students, especially with non-participatory students. So there was a combination of three things that happened. There was synchronous classes, and I'm gonna go over a slide in a minute that talks about what type of learning students liked most. And then, so we had that. We had asynchronous, which mostly happened through Google Classroom. And I can talk more about that if we like. And then we had digital programs. So one of our philosophies, if you looked at our target for student success, is that we believe in personalized learning. If you believe in personalized learning, there generally has to be an element of digital programs, because in order to meet the child in their point of need and their point of interest. It's almost impossible to do it without technology. And so because of that, we have students that are using a range of different things from Lexia. We are one of the 5 school districts in the nation that was selected by Khan Academy to implement MAP Accelerator. So we use MAP Accelerator. We also have a community-wide literacy program called Footsteps to Brilliance. So it was really those 3 elements that allowed us to tackle instruction and have new learning occur, which I can show you data from students in a minute. You want to do the Jumpstart, Ivan?
Sure. So we are actually preparing for our summer work. We hope to provide an opportunity for our students to reclaim perhaps some of the missed learning opportunities. So we are kind of having conversations about a rotation style kind of conference model where we plan to offer 55-minute workshop sessions. And through these 55-minute workshop sessions, we were going to try to provide some literacy and mathematics instruction, as well as support the development of executive functioning skills. So part of that also includes embedding some of the SEL work that we embark through distance learning, and then continuing some of the student connectedness that is really important during this time, right? So in addition to the academics that are crucial, we also recognize and understand that there's a need to address the whole child. So we will continue with some of the SEL curriculum, embed some of the team building activities, and continue with our PBIS work. Really, our plan is to remind students that we deeply care about them and that we are ready to welcome them back to a new school year.
And that will be in person if you can?
Yes, so if we can, that is the goal. And of course, Dr. Rodriguez will talk a little bit more about the contingency plans.
But how did you identify the students who will be participating in this?
Yeah, so we will start off with the list of students, or the target population of the students who either were low participant or actually no participation, which is a very small group of students. And then from there we expand, right? So we look at subgroups and needs. So for instance, there may be a subgroup, or our special ed department may also help us in support with those subgroups as well. So targeting our low participation group, and then reaching out and expanding those as necessary.
And Superintendent, you mentioned gifted students as well here.
Yeah, so what we know to be true is that students on both spectrums need additional supports. So when it comes down to personalized learning not only deals with remediation and trying to support unfinished learning, but it also is about supporting acceleration of students. We have found, when we looked at the student survey results, so we did survey results with students on how they were feeling and their social and emotional needs. We did find that GATE students felt very disconnected, and they were a subgroup of students that felt that they learned more from in-person instruction, and they really missed that cognitive dissonance that they could have within a classroom setting. And so we will also be targeting some of our gifted and talented students through our gifted and talented teacher on special assignment and department.
Will you be assessing all the students, or particularly these students, to determine, what are the areas that you need to focus on when you come back to school?
Yeah, so we use measures of academic progress. Unfortunately, because of the closure, we didn't get to do the final. But we do have data already, that we have the winter data, and then we have other data points that already help us to know what to target. So we will be able to use those groupings in order to be able to support. We are currently working with NWEA to identify ways, that's part of the contingency planning, but to identify ways that we can ethically and realistically assess students while they are home using measures of academic progress. So we're still dedicated to that. That's, if most people are aware of that assessment, but the reason why I really appreciate it is because it shows growth. And our commitment to students is that they will make at least 1 year's progress in one instructional year. And if they are behind, that they will make more.
Before we move on to contingency planning, could you talk a little bit about how you have dealt with English learners and students with disabilities during the closure time?
Sure. Let me just because we're talking about instruction, if I can just show this really
sure.
quick, and I definitely will do that. So one thing that we know, this goes back to what we were saying before about students' perceptions, right? I thought this was really interesting data. There was a question before of how many students and teachers and parents responded. Of the students, we had 785 students that responded. You know, it is not as, I mean, it is a chunk of students, but you know, we provided this survey, this particular survey to 6th through 12th grade students only. We're doing an additional survey that will include our younger students. But so, you know, the response rate is about 10%, which isn't great. But when you looked at who represented it, it was a pretty representative chunk of students, meaning the schools had representation and the grade levels had representation. But what was interesting is you have 47% of your students saying, I have too much classwork. And then you have 44% that's saying it's just the right number, right? You do have, you can't see it, but because there is no number here, but you had a sliver, it was at 5% that said that they had too few assignments. But what I thought was interesting when you asked them what type of learning they preferred, what was interesting to me is that the notes on videos was their top choice, and then participating in classroom meetings. So what that told us about next steps in terms of contingency planning is really that we need to continue to focus on having multiple opportunities every week for students to be able to engage with teachers, right? So teachers are extremely important to them, staff is extremely important to them, and they desire that connection. The next are the online programs that they were wanting. So kind of going back to the students with special needs. So we have a very robust staff here. So we have over 200 instructional assistants. We have 60 behavior techs. And I mention them because they are an integral part of the support system for learning. So what we provided technology, a Chromebook, and if needed, a hotspot to each behavior tech and each instructional assistant, so that they daily could reach out to students that were either having challenges, not participating, or when they connected with them, just said that they needed to have that consistent contact. And so we have that. We have teletherapy that is happening for all of our designated services. I think that's very unique, because one thing that we had said before was that we are going to teach new content during this time. We are going to ensure that our students continue to learn. And so the only way to do that is to continue to maintain those supports. So we say high expectations coupled with high supports. And so we continue to do teletherapy for our special education students. Specifically, we have a matrix for each and every child that says what each goal is, and then what our plan of attack and evaluation on the work that happens. So I want to recognize the hundreds of special education teachers that out there that are doing the work. If you follow me on Twitter, you will see just the amazing work that they're doing, all the way from our adaptive PE teacher, who was just named one of our Innovation Teachers of the Year just last night, who does these incredible videos for all students, you can see one of our 3-year-olds from Duncan Holbert getting their speech therapy via online with their parents. So we are dedicated to ensuring that is going to happen. Ivan, I think, covered well with the English learners. The only thing I'd add is that we have required that both designated and embedded ELD continue during the entire time. So we continue to ensure that language development is happening as we move forward. Ivan, did you want to add on at all?
No, but I do think that there's several questions that are either on the Q&A that we might want to answer.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ivan. Which ones jumped out?
So there was a question about, was the parent education team set up before COVID-19 situation, or did it get set up as a response to the situation?
Yeah, so no, we've had a powerful team for years here. And it's really, it's led by our parent specialists. So Ruby Vasquez and Brenda Guzman are 2 wonderful women who are dedicated to supporting our parents and all the team under them. I know there are many people under them that do that work. I think that goes back to why we were quickly able to move forward, right? So if you have the infrastructure, the system in place, then you are able to do that. So when you go back to our target for student success and you look at the ring of the levers of what we say is important, meaningful relationships is one of the 4 levers, which meant that we had to allocate resources, time, and attention to our parents. And so we were able to do that. And I know Ivan capitalized on that with his implementation.
Ivan, I'm curious, as somebody who's been a principal, assistant principal at high school and a principal now in middle school, what's the difference that you've noticed in distance learning, how to approach the students at those different age groups?
Well, John, it might be difficult for me to answer that question because I was an assistant principal when we were not in distance learning.
Right.
But I can tell you that at the middle school level, the social and emotional learning component is much stronger and more needed, right? So given the psychological development that our students are going through, that level of connection between students and teacher, it is the way that you're going to actually get them to engage in any type of instruction. So our staff here on our campus recognizes that we need to have strong connections in order for us to engage them in distance learning. So that's one of the reasons why this Social and Emotional Wellness Wednesday was created and developed, because we know how important that is for instruction as well.
A couple questions specific questions about, again, how the instruction went. What kind of time frame did students have to complete the lessons they were assigned? Was it daily, weekly? And did you establish some kind of participation baseline in terms of completion?
Yeah, so the distance learning expectation was that each child would receive a base of 4 instructional hours a week. A day, not a week. A day. We started out at 5. We listened. This is part of the iteration. We found that it was too much. We were hearing from students' families that 5 hours a day was too much for students. We say a base because it should flux. So meaning I might be a student that I want and need additional support. So I will be receiving additional time and support, whether it's for acceleration for an English learner or if it's for continued enrichment for a high achieving student, all the way to a student who is struggling and is not able to keep up. We did what was called reduction to core subjects, which allowed them to reduce down their amount of participation in order to maintain it. So we had what was called an interactive dialogue process for all students that were not engaging. One thing that we saw, and Ivan mentioned it briefly at the beginning, but not all students engage with each teacher equally. So students were making choices by either content area because um, one content area was harder for them, so they might have shied away from it, or whether it was a relationship, a stronger relationship they had with one teacher versus the other. But we definitely did see our non-participation rate was the highest at the middle school level. And so what we're doing in the contingency planning is really building in elements of student engagement, which is why this chart that I'm showing here is so important, because what we saw was 17,000 students a day was logging into Google Classroom, which is 96% of our students. But then if you ask the teachers and you said, are you receiving work from 96% of your students? The answer was no, right? So the question, the positive of that is two things. One, we know that they have the device and the ability to get online. And two, we know that they have the knowledge to be able to access where we want them to go. And that they were actually logging in, not just on their computer, but logging into Google Classroom. So then now it's a question of just hooking them in, which goes back to the Jumpstart, which goes back to really understanding their needs, and like the Wellness Wednesday, folding in what they need so that they can continue. I will say with the contingency planning, we are looking at, so I have a saying that one size fits none. And I use that frequently, but what we also know from the contingency planning is that additional standardization is also good for our students and can be positive for collaboration. And so we are moving towards having autonomy and respect for teacher craft, while at the same time doing some standardization of the process, and definitely increasing the amount of classroom meetings that our students engage in.
We have a question. How were teachers able to do cooperative group work while schools have been closed and they were teaching remotely?
Well, I think that that's exactly why the kids love the classroom meetings, right? So through Google Classroom, we use Google Meet. The students are able to collaborate. We use Google Slides, Google Forms, all where kids can simultaneously be supporting each other. Many teachers are using Padlet as well as a way to encourage students to be collaborating simultaneously on a document. And so although it's different, you know, we had to train students, you know, how do you jump into a conversation? How do you raise your hand and move forward? But we've really been able to see group work continue at the younger level. And then I want Ivan to answer this question. At a younger level, we're also doing a lot of small group work. So we're not always polling. So for example, we use SIPs for our early literacy program. And so we have teachers that are polling 5 students and still doing a SIPs lesson with them, and they're watching them and providing feedback, and the kids are working together. And so it isn't always a group of 20 students that are online. Sometimes it's a small group. Ivan, you want to talk more about how they're collaborating online?
Yeah, so on our campus, we definitely encourage our staff to work together. So by grade level and department. So as grade level and department, they develop these activities that encourage that collaborative approach. So the teachers got together, used several tools to be able to reach out to students, whether it was Play Posit, Ed Puzzles, a whole variety of just tech tools. But one interesting thing that we did on our campus was we actually designated office hours per se for students, and to be able to do that collaborative work as well. So during office hours, so teachers would post these dates and times in which they were actually going to be working with either individual students or a group of students to be able to create that collaborative feel and approach as well.
So how were teachers able to continue working cooperatively or doing lesson plannings during this time? Was it built into the schedule, or how'd you handle that?
You can talk about your Wednesdays, Ivan. You want to do that?
Yeah, so we on our campus every Wednesdays is our designated collaboration days as well. And so we hold different meeting levels. So whether it's a grade level meeting, meeting by job alike departments. And so during that time, we're also kind of working towards building curriculum, discussing student work, discussing student performance and so forth. And so looking at student data and figuring out how do we use that to inform the next steps for our campus. So we also meet as a large staff. And so then Google Meets, Zoom meetings, oftentimes there was Google documents as well that was being shared across. We also did, as a site, we systemized our lesson plan templates and also kind of our outlines. So as a site, we kind of commonly used a method of communicating and help us, make our directions and instructions for students more robust.
Yeah. So do you want me to do, John, just a few minutes on the contingency planning, or?
Please do.
Okay. So we'll jump back. I know people are like, what? So one thing that we did in terms of for the grading practices, which we followed suit on the reopening contingency plan, is really to have some guiding principles. The reason why for me the guiding principles are important is because as we are creating these plans, so we have about 50 people who are involved. We have about 15 from PVFT, which is Pajaro Valley Federation of Teachers, and then we have about 15 from CSEA, which is our classified union, and the remainder are administration, where we're working on these contingency plans. We've been working on it now for since early May, and we kept these as our 5 guiding principles. Mostly because we wanted to serve them as a litmus test, right? So keeping our students and staff safe is our first priority. We are doing a lot on collective advocacy. You'll hear we are trying, as we mentioned previously, just working on system inequities. We want to build it from the start for our most vulnerable students and then move out. Ensure new grade level content is an academic priority, and that we're engaging collaboratively and we're communicating through reciprocal means, right? So not just us communicating out, but people communicating back with us. We did have these assumptions, and I know everybody feels this, but just to plan for the plan to change, right? So we know just within the last several days how things have, or weeks, how things have changed throughout the state. Knowing that we need to have the support of the health department, we recognize that we are going to need to provide in-person and distance learning. We are in the middle of sending out our needs assessment, which I'll speak to in a minute, to our parents and staff and students. We are going to need PPE, and what we're advocating at the state level is we are going to have changes to ed code. All of you will, right? So we have to have changes to instructional minutes. We have to have changes to instructional days. We have to have changes, ed code changes to independent study. If not, none of us, not me, not you, can do this without ed code changes. Many of us are going to have board policies. And then of course the CBAs have to change as well, so that we don't get ourselves in the same process or same issue that some school districts got themselves in, where they couldn't start distance learning for 40 to 50 days. Which meant it was 40 or 50 days where students went with no learning. And of course that we're gonna have daily cleaning. So this is our timeline. So we're here, we started May 13th, where we meet twice a week with our planning teams, once whole group, once with our subgroup. The needs assessment is what we'll be sending out tomorrow. We already did a distance learning needs assessment. This is a reopening of school needs assessment. We deliberately changed them on purpose because we wanted to make sure that we kind of kept them separate. Those 30 partners that you saw, we are going to be meeting with them on June 15th so that they can provide us preliminary information and feedback. I'm going to do a special board meeting where I'm going to present the draft contingency plan along with some of the members of the team. And then we will send it out to the community for feedback. So we will do the entire draft to the community. We'll give them time to come back. And then we will reconvene our planning teams so that we can know our what is going to happen by July 13th. It was important for us to give our parents at least a month in order to be able to know what we were doing. However, as with one of our assumptions, we have to plan for the plan to change. We really won't know until we're closer to August 17th, which one of the identified contingency plans we will need to have in place. And that is the contingency planning team. I do want to appreciate the hard work that PVFT and CSEA members and administration has done to make this this contingency planning happen. It is a lot of hours every week that we're putting in to make this happen for students.
I know you don't know how many parents might want to keep their children home because of their own concern for a lot of reasons over safety, but how would you handle that structure for parents who want to keep their children home for instruction at the same time that you're trying to do in-school instruction?
Well, I think no matter what, we're going to have to figure that out just because of class sizes, right? So because of the class size requirement, we're going to have an element of teachers who are doing distance learning. And so we're looking at a large various options right now. One of the options is us beginning to have one of our own virtual K-12 school. So we have an independent study school already, but this would be for parents and students who want to go full-time distance learning and they want to go virtual. That would allow us, again, we would need to have Ed Code make some changes in order to do that. But it would be very much, especially for people in California, for the high school version, it would be like almost like a high-tech high version, right? Where people who chose to keep their children at home. There is also a subset of staff who, because of their own health conditions and just health history, family, it would be a challenge for them to work physically within a school setting. And so this would provide an opportunity to really have both sets get what they need, both the teachers and the students, which is what we want.
How will you provide additional training for teachers to improve their distance learning instruction?
Yeah, so we have Wednesdays, as Ivan mentioned, we have Wednesdays, which are off. We believe in cognitive saturation. So for school districts that are believing that they can do a week, a full week, and then think everybody's good, that actually is not good adult learning, right? So it would be throughout the school year. We also need to recognize just the great learning that has happened over these past 3 months. So a lot of teachers that were not at once equipped, going back to the phone calls and the sessions that I pointed to earlier, that were not equipped now are. And so we really want to provide, going back to personalized learning, we believe that for students and adults, right? So we want to recognize that some teachers are already up and running and going full steam. Some are right in the middle, and some need additional support. So the goal is to provide that differentiated support. I know I've mentioned the tech team multiple times, but we have a whole cadre of people, whether it is the tech liaisons, that is one at each site, that we've been building for years, or it is our tech-TOSAs, which are teachers on special assignment, or it is our site technicians that have really transitioned to supporting distance learning, not just on the device side, but the actual learning side. So we have, hundreds of staff that are supporting that work. Again, it was an infrastructure that we had that we were able to pivot.
We talk about middle school students. How about students in younger grades? What strategies have you identified, particularly that work for the youngest students, even early childhood, the youngest kids?
Yeah, so I think for ECE students, what we found was that it needed to be very practical. And so because of that, we are having them do learning that they can find within their own house. So again, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see some pictures, whether it's kids are counting the legs of, for math, they're counting the legs of tables and chairs, and doing that work to finding beans, coins, anything that they can have in order to do the work. I also mentioned we are continuing with small group instruction. We believe heavily in mastery-based learning, specifically for literacy. And so we did not give that up. And I really give kudos to our K2, K3 teachers who have continued to do small group instruction of literacy with their students, so that they can they can use corrective routines. So if I have just 5 others and I can see all my students on the screen, I can still provide corrective routines to them. We are providing a blended approach for them because we do not, especially our youngest, we do not believe that they should be on a screen all day. So we do a combination of paper packets every week. Our parents pick up the packet on Monday, drop it off on Friday. They pick up a new packet on Monday. They receive feedback on their previous week's packet, along with digital programs and synchronous learning as well.
I had a question on high school grading. How was your policy toward that?
So we did a hold harmless policy, but we did use grades. So our students received nothing lower than their 3rd quarter grade. So one positive of this was that when we went off line, so we closed schools on March 13th, we were just then closing out 3rd quarter. So the good thing is we had solid 3rd quarter grades. So I met with students, I met with teachers and administration, and we were, so it was about 150 in total for the high school. We did it middle school as well, the same process, but we chose that. So students received nothing lower, if they participated, nothing lower than their 3rd quarter grade. If they chose not to participate, if they could show, that was the interactive process that we mentioned, if they could show that they had reason to not participate, meaning that they were now being requested to work in the field, they had to do childcare, we found other options, instructional options for them. We have a rigorous adult school here, so we have other options for them. We have an independent study school here, so they were able to do that. If they just chose not to do it, they received a no credit.
So looking ahead, what's your biggest challenge, do you think? Is it the uncertainty of not knowing what form or how we might switch in and out? Is it the budget, not, the uncertainty over how much money you'll have and the prospect that you may have to do with less at the same time that we're talking about, all these demands of students who are home and then students who are in school as well?
Yeah, well, the legislature, I believe, is going to come through for us. So hopefully that that will not be a moot point. So I believe it's probably going to be the social emotional needs of our students. And so this has been a challenging time for adults. It's been a challenging time for students, but I think students are mirroring the emotions of adults. And so although we have a robust system using PVPSA, our social emotional counselors, our academic counselors, and of course, just teacher and staff connection and administration connection, I think that will be our largest challenge is how do you support the continued needs of people. And then of course, change is hard. And so constant variation and change is challenging for many. So we're managing that.
And advice to parents between now and then?
A couple of things. One, look at this as an opportunity and what it provided for you for on the positive side. So look at it from that standpoint. And ensure, I know we're almost out of school, but ensure that your child continues to learn even throughout the summer. They have their Chromebook, they got to keep it, and they got to keep their hotspot. So you can keep them on our digital programs and you can keep them learning even if it's just an hour a day.
Well, the hour has flown by and we've gotten through a lot. I thank you very much. It's been really informative and I'm sure valuable for the hundreds of people watching. Ivan, we thank you for joining us. Well, Michelle, we'll be posting the slides and for those of you who don't have all of your questions answered, you actually will be getting a second chance because Michelle will be participating on Thursday, June 11th in a webinar sponsored by PACE and Pivot Learning. And the details of that you can find at their websites or actually on ours. In the meantime, I hope to see every one of you back tomorrow, and we will take a look at Anaheim Union High School District with Superintendent Mike Matsuda. You can register on our website. Thank you again, Michelle and Ivan.
Yeah, thank you. All right,
Thank you for participating. Thank you.